and to help us move forward, to understand how what we do is in the context of a much larger system of higher education in our country and the direction of that, we've invited Sonny Ramaswamy. Sonny is the president of the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities. It's our accrediting body for all higher education in this part of the country. And I've been to a couple of conferences that he has put on, and he has a new vision, a unique vision, a great vision for the future of higher education. And he is here to talk to us about the higher education landscape and future. So everybody, please help me welcome Sonny Ramaswamy.
Good afternoon, and President Satterley, thank you so much for your kind invitation for me to spend a little bit of time this afternoon with you folks here as you're thinking about the path that you're going to choose. And President Crisfield and Executive Director Matt Freeman and certainly Provost Nye. Is that what you go with? Yeah, okay. Laura, and I've known her for a year and a half or so, and it's so good to see all of you. Thank you very much for having me here. I particularly want to thank Darren as well for organizing my travel to come down here. At the outset, I want to say to you, thank you very much for sharing an individual that's been part of your institution. One's Lena Grace. She is now working for the Northwest Commission, and thank you very much. She brings phenomenal skills that she has honed both at Idaho State University and certainly working for the Idaho State Board as well. And she's going to be a tremendous asset to us collectively across the Northwest region. So, a couple of things that President Crisfield, your board president, said, and President Satterley, your institutional president, said, really inspired me, and I hope it's inspired all of you as well. The first one that Debbie said is that your success is our success, is how she framed it. And I think that's really, really important for all of us to consider as well. That is, the students that all of you work with, the families that you work with, the communities that you work with, their success is going to determine your success. And so there's an altruistic aspect to what you do as being educators, is to ensure what Kevin referred to as well in his comments, is to help change the human condition. And many of the students that come to this institution, they come here from various backgrounds, and in fact, you see more and more students that come from a background that is not the traditional background of students that used to come to this institution. And almost about 20% plus of the students are students of color that come here. But in general, students at Idaho State University, unlike other institutions, come from background of being from rural communities. As Kevin said, it's they have a reason for being here is that they're placebound, for example. They come from rural communities, they come from poor communities, they come from, as I said, students of color that come here, etc. And it is the privilege that you and I have as well, of helping change that human condition. And I think that's something that's very important to think of, that there is a raison d'etre, the reason for being an institution is the ability to change the human condition of the students that come to this institution. And in thinking about the conversations that you have had, and the conversations that you'll have over the next year and a half, and then the path that you're going to choose, the strategic path that you're going to choose. And I myself personally dislike the idea of a strategic plan, because as Debbie said, sometimes those plans, they get written up, and then they go on a shelf and sit there for the next 5 or 6 or 7 years until a new leader comes along and says, we're going to go through this process again. And in the meantime, nothing has been looked at, and but I think this process needs to be a dynamic process, because the environment in which we are is a very dynamic environment. Educators, professors, and instructors and others, y'all are the change agents. And it is about change, and it's a very dynamic process. And so I myself like to use the term strategic path of direction, and in fact in Kevin's comments, he referred to it multiple times as the path that you're going to choose, because it allows you to make it dynamic. It allows you to make sure that you're paying attention to the externalities and the internalities and try to make the mid-course corrections as you go along as well. Because you're constantly trying to figure out, are you headed in the right direction? Yeah, capturing data and metrics and measures and evidence and things like that, and you're trying to take the slight changes that you need to take as well as go forward. So, with that as the context, this afternoon, in the next about 30 minutes or so, I want to speak about the bigger, broader context of Idaho State University and Pocatello being part of this, not just the state of Idaho, but really not just the United States of America, but more broadly, the global context as well. And I want to share with you a little bit about what I refer to as the new economy that's driving everything that we do. And then share with you about some of the trends that we're seeing in higher education. And again, it's a very global phenomenon. It's not just a phenomenon that's happening in our own backyards here in Pocatello. Really, there's a global context that we're in. And I met Mr. Jim Johnston here just a few minutes ago, and he is a local realtor, and he said, this is really important to me. Those are the exact words. And it tells you that you've got people that are passionate about what happens to the institution and how you fit in to the overall context of not just this community, this town, but really more importantly, globally as well. So if you pick up on the very first phrase, the new economy, and there's what, about 150 people here maybe, just about that many. If I were to go around this room and ask what does the term new economy mean to you, you'll probably say, Kevin, what would you say the new economy is? Changing the technology. Debbie, being the board chair. Board president, my bad. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I would go along with Kevin and adapting to what the future industry are.
All right, Mr. Johnston. Sir, what does the new economy mean to you?
We've got to be sharp.
We got to be sharp.
We've got to, those of us who are not in the university, have got to have a growing edge.
Okay.
So that we can keep up and maybe add to what the students are getting.
Okay. Excellent.
I'm worried about keeping up.
Okay, Mr. Johnston is worried about having a sharp edge and keeping up. All right, anybody in the back there? There's a lady standing in the back against the wall looking at her iPhone or a smartphone. What do you think the new economy means to you? I caught you there.
Strategic path, new economy, global context.
Nicely done.
The economy really is doing exactly what we're doing. We're planning ahead for what our youth need for their future.
Okay.
That's our security and our task force.
Okay. Is there a student in the audience here? A student? There's a student there. Very carefully, she's putting her hand up. A little hesitant. Go ahead, student.
Here and I realize it's probably the only one, but. Okay.
All right. So tell me, what do you think of the new economy?
For me, new economy means efficiency, but as other people are
Okay.
planning ahead, can't just jump into things. It's making sure that we're, like, what we're planning on doing here is making plans so that way if something does happen, it's not a surprise.
Okay.
We have ways to kind of cushion us, but also finding ways to be more efficient and also more ways to kind of reach out.
So the student talks about being more efficient, not to be surprised, to be prepared, etc. All right? And we had a hand go up here. Yes, sir.
Changes in how value is created and competitive dynamics.
Okay. How value is created and this competitive dynamics that we've done as well. Yes, and if I went around, every one of you would have a particular idea that you could express that signifies what the new economy means. And in fact, sometimes I use this as a point of departure many times as given a whole bunch of talks over the last many years. And my own background, by the way, it has been in the world of food and agriculture, and I worked for the U.S. government, and then I worked in academia as well. And so, the new economy, the phrase, was invented, by the way, by Time magazine back in 1983. And they said at that time that the United States and Western Europe and Japan were morphing from a manufacturing economy into an information economy. And we've seen that since about the early 1980s. And with the invention of the internet by Al Gore in the 1990s, et cetera, we've seen this playing out over the last many years, where we're so incredibly affected by the information economy. And actually, there's if you look at it in the context of the 21st century that we're in, there's a whole bunch of it, along with the comments that were made earlier here by various individuals in the room. There's a whole slew of them that are having an impact on this new economy. I think the biggest of these is the population and demographic changes that we see. Just look at this region of the country, or this country. This country, with all due respect to this audience, except for a few individuals that sort of kind of look like me, okay? With all due respect, if you look at the projections of the Census Bureau, in just another about 20 years or so, you're going to see more of me. What I mean by more of me is foreign born in a poor family, first-time college students, had the privilege of coming to America, and asked to stay put here, and I'm now a contributing member of America. And my human condition was impacted very significantly by the education that was offered to me by a lot of people like yourselves as I was growing up, both in India as well as here in the United States. But those two things, particularly the demographics, are having a very significant impact on this whole economy. Every day we see it happening. And along with that is, innovations, and the president in Saturday was referring to, being student-centered and being career-ready and health and human wellness and things like that. All of those are part of this as well. And incidentally, we've got issues related to, climate change and stewardship and this part of the country particularly. You're going to hear later on about some of the local businesses and economic opportunities, enterprises that we've got. And some of those include everybody in my world, in my former world, I should say, of agriculture, but include everybody from J.R. Simplot to the Chobani and the dairies and other industries that we've got in this part of the world as well. All of them are being impacted very significantly by climate change, by diminishing land and water resources. Water is going to be the next existential threat. And these are all having an impact on this part of this new economy that we've got. And there's certainly, last but not least, is this whole environment that we're in. And this anti-intellectual, anti-science environment that we've got here in the United States as well as globally. And in fact, in some parts of America, anybody that says they're going to go to college is looked down upon. That there's something bad wrong with that sort of a situation, that they're going to end up going to college. Why don't you go ahead and take up a job? In fact, back in November, I think, or November, I was in northern Idaho, and I was in Coeur d'Alene, and I went to speak at North Idaho College, not unlike this. And I met a gentleman in the hotel lobby at the Coeur d'Alene Resort. And that gentleman, he said, "What do you do?" Of course, I was wearing a suit. He figured I'm a suit. And he wanted to know what I did. And I said, I work in the education field. And he said, you know what you should do? You should tell those colleges that they should be training all these people that come there to get some skills. It's not about critical thinking and problem solving and things of that nature, but really have them learn some skills so they can work in the nearest factory. Well, America morphed from the manufacturing economy many, many decades ago. And in fact, if we were to focus on helping students only develop, I'm saying, it's not mutually exclusive, only develop hands-on technical skills, the Chinese who are eating our lunch today will eat our dinners as well, because they're really exquisitely better at technical skills than we are. However, what keeps America ahead, what allows America to put a man on the moon, to invent the internet, etc., is because we inculcate at these colleges, like Idaho State University, the ability to think critically, to solve problems, to be able to communicate, to work in a team environment, etc. That's what it's all about. Okay? And yet, we're faced with this anti-intellectual, anti-science environment that we're in as well. So we've got to operate in that context. You can't go around saying, you dummy you or whatever, because that turns people off completely. you'd much rather go ahead and say, okay, fair enough, you may have such a view, but this is what's needed. This is what society needs, right? This is where our role is as educators to be playing, and that's what the new economy is. So how do you think, as you're thinking about your path that you're going to be choosing, how does this influence you in what you're going to be doing? Remember that you're not sitting in a little silo here in Pocatello that is far removed from the rest of the world. All of these things are going to be having an impact on you. And when you take that sort of a global perspective and bring it down to the perspective of higher education itself, there's a whole slew of internal pressures that you face on campuses. And this is a never-ending series of internal pressures. And these pressures certainly deal with particularly on the cost of education that we see, and again, the demographic changes, the enrollment declines. In fact, at your institutions, in just the last couple of years, you've seen some declining enrollments. And indeed, across America, we're seeing very significant declining enrollments. Because the economy is doing great, one part. More importantly, America, we're not having enough babies in this country. Lucky for America, otherwise, if we're not producing enough babies. Actually, we're replacing ourselves at the rate of about 1.85 to 1.9, by the way. We need to have at least 2 to come in at 2.1, as a matter of fact, to come in as replacement for our own selves. Yeah, that's what's happening in America. And if you look at what's happened in Eastern Europe, in Northern Europe, in Iran, for example, or in China, in Korea and Japan and places like that, they're not replacing themselves fast enough. And lucky for us here in America, we've got people like me that are coming here in large numbers. And were it not for these immigrants coming in, we would all be in a whole lot of hurt. In fact, if you talk to any person that is involved in some economic enterprise, they say one of the most challenging situations they've got is to find individuals coming in to contribute to their enterprises they've got. And that's a very significant challenge for people. So you've got a whole slew of them. And in fact, one other aspect of these internal pressures and also external pressures is this issue related to economic and social mobility. Kevin referred to it in his comments as well. This is a moral imperative for all of us. That the students that come here, it is about changing their human condition and then to inculcate in them the ability to improve their own economic and social status in their community that they're part of. We talk about how, your zip code should not determine what happens to you. And we talk about how demography should not be destiny. These are the issues that we talk about. And I think as you're thinking about your strategic plan, that I really, truly appreciate what Kevin was referring to, that needs to be part of the context in which you set forward this path that you want to go forward. And then there's a whole slew of these external pressures as well. And the external pressures, one of which, very simply, is the value proposition. We collectively, to paraphrase Pogo, I've seen the enemy and he is us. Us collectively. We have failed to demonstrate the value proposition to the taxpayers of this country, to the public of this country. In fact, in some quarters in America, in this intellectual, anti-science environment that we've got, higher education is viewed as a pejorative term. Who needs it? In fact, we're like leeches, that our professors are overpaid and underworked, and that we're like leeches on the public, that we may as well go ahead and shut them down, and we won't even miss them, is the attitude that's being provided. In fact, people say that the University of Phoenix or other institutions, online institutions, can meet all of our needs and demands. But there's a difference in a student that comes to an on-campus brick-and-mortar institution as well, where they'll learn this ability to interact with each other, socialize and things like that. If you've not read his work, I'd encourage you to read one, James Heckman, H-E-C-H-M-A-N. He's a Nobel laureate economist who's written a lot about this particular topic of the skills that students develop when they come on campuses. These skills pertaining to critical thinking, problem solving, communication skills, what we refer to as core competencies. In some quarters, they may be referred to as soft skills. I refer to them as core competencies. Okay? Value proposition. We've got to, in the strategic path that you're choosing, you've got to figure out what is that value proposition that you're trying to demonstrate to the residents of this community here, as well as the state across the state and across America itself. That's really important. There's other aspects to this as well, obviously. Technology and these online courses and MOOCs and massively open online courses and things like that. In fact, you're seeing at this institution and practically most institutions in America, we're seeing a declining enrollment. Okay? Except for Southern New Hampshire University and Western Governors University. They currently have about 150,000 students each. On track, their aspirational goal is to get to 500,000 students in just the next few years. Okay? Students can sit at their leisure on a beach or in a bar or at home or whatever and get, in quotes, all of the education that they want, that they need. Okay? That's your competition as well. It's not just the fact that you've got, other institutions within the state or, across state borders and things like that. The competition is also these MOOCs and things like that. And one other aspect of this is the changing economy itself. And if you look at the changing economy and the next bullet there, the need for reskilling and upskilling. In the good old days, and Kevin, I want you to kind of rethink the statement that you made as you're introducing your vision and all that, with all due respect to you, is in the good old days, i.e., you went to college, let's say about 20 years ago, your college degree was good for another about 30 or 40 years. You went to college, you got a job, it was a pretty nice middle-class existence, and then you retired into a middle-class existence as well. That was almost guaranteed. Today, so the shelf life of education in the old days was about 30 to 40 years. Today's education, the shelf life is only about 4 to 5 years. Because the technology and other things are rapidly changing. And not only that, we have the gig economy, where it's, an individual might go work at this particular endeavor for a year or 2 or 3, and then go to another endeavor, or hold multiple different gigs. In fact, my Uber driver, and I wrote about it in our newsletter. By the way, here's a little advertisement. Our newsletter is referred to as The Beacon. And please go to nwccu.org/beacon and read it. We've got some fantastic essays in there. Not because I'm writing in it as well, because there are other folks that are writing in there. And I wrote about my interactions with an Uber driver. She picked me up at Seattle Airport. It was pretty sad for me to listen to her. She said she was no better off today after a 4-year degree from one of my institutions, my family of institutions, than she was before she got that degree. And she was holding down 3 different gigs, one of them as an Uber driver, one of them with Amazon, and one of them working in an old folks' home. She has to do 3 of them because she's paying off her student loans and she's taking care of her family, etc. Shame on that institution that they did not help her at all. No career counseling, nothing. And that's what education is all about. So in the strategic plan that you've got, that's the other aspect of it. What happens to those students? You've got great metrics that you want to collect and all that. Well, how do you make sure that those students are being mentored, not just, what classes you take, the advising that they get, do they go through the Pathways program or the Alex program or whatever else you've got? But you're actually also holding their hand to help them think of the possibilities when they finish up. So that gig economy is a competitor for you as well. Very much a competitor. That's the context that we've got. And I can go on and on, speak for the next 2 or 3 hours about these various pressures that we've got. And that must be part of your thinking as well, as you're thinking of the path that you're going to be choosing as you go forward. And then the third part is the accreditation piece. And that's me. I represent that as the Northwest Commission. So when you look at accreditation itself, there's a reason for it. And oftentimes, what happens is people think it's about the money. Sure, it is about the money. There's no doubt about it. In fact, a lot of the institutions in Idaho, the the institutions that are overseen by the state board here. Many of them have a predominance of students that are Pell eligible, by the way. They're first generation students. They come from poor backgrounds, underserved backgrounds, and things like that. So money is a very significant part of that dynamic. There's no doubt about it. But really, more importantly, it is about the reputation of the institution. So if you're not accredited as an institution, your graduates may not very easily find jobs because whoever's going to employ those graduates is going to make sure that they're graduating from an accredited institution. So, secondly, it's also about students. It's about their achievement. It's about their success, about learning and things like that. It's about continuous improvement. It's about quality assurance. All of these terminologies that your president incorporated into his overall vision that he shared with you as well. And so accreditation is a very significant part of that path that you're going to choose as well. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the fact that there are several things that are going to happen here. And accreditation, for those of you that don't know a whole lot about it, is number one, it is a bunch of peer evaluators that go around. Not people like me. I don't go out on these visits and all that. We've got people like Dr. Nye here, Provost Nye, who goes on these visits for us, and there's others in the audience here probably that go on these visits for us as well. And so these are peers that go to like institutions and evaluate whether those institutions are achieving the goals that they have set for themselves. And they measure against our standards, our eligibility requirements, and our policies as well. And oh, by the way, it is a partnership, or we refer to this partnership as a triad. The partnership is between the United States Department of Education, the state regulatory authorities, and us as the accreditors. It's a partnership, and we work hand in hand to make sure that the institution that is being accredited is firing on all cylinders, adhering and responding to all of the requirements each one of us has in the process of that accreditation itself. And so accreditation, a lot of times, Laura and I were just talking about that earlier, and oftentimes when you walk on campuses and things like that, you talk with the average faculty member, you say I'm an accreditor, or something about accreditation, and their eyes will roll and say, accreditation? Well, I don't need to do all of that, because I sent a letter to the president saying that your institution is up for your Year 7 institutional effectiveness process. The president sends a note to the provost and says to the provost, take care of it. And the provost has somebody in the office, not unlike Selena Grace, or maybe it's Darren here now, and says to Darren, take care of this. And then the provost, during her cabinet, all the deans that are assembled there, she says to the deans, gotta do this accreditation, go ahead and get it done. Then the deans will then devolve it to the department chairs or department heads or whatever you've got here. And the department head says, oh man, we're so busy teaching and doing our research and things like that. So then it gets kicked back up. And so Darren goes around, there are some individuals in the colleges and other places, and he does a book review, pulls data out, etc. I'm not saying that you're supposed to do it that way, but many of the institutions do it that way. And the report is put together. The faculty is totally oblivious of this happening. And they submit the report. And the report itself is a self-study. It's like holding a mirror up to yourself, looking at yourself, how beautiful you are or how ugly you are, warts and all. And then it gives you an opportunity to think of what the possibilities could be. That's what it's about. That's how come you do the self-study. And really important for our faculty and staff and students, everybody to be involved in this. Again, it goes back to our value proposition. Collectively, we've failed to provide to the faculty members. There is value in thinking about students and student learning outcomes, assessment and things like that. We have one situation with one of our institutions where that institution faculty said, faculty governance, academic freedom, don't tell me what to do about assessment and all that. It's my baby. That's what we were told, okay? So there are some institutions, and oh, by the way, that institution has got the faculty not only have a very strong Senate, but they're also unionized. And so the union says that the president cannot tell, or the provost cannot tell the faculty how to assess and do all these other data collection and things like that. Each institution is a little bit different. I think in large measure because we have failed to provide that value proposition. It's really incumbent on all of us as you're doing your strategic thinking and all that, that you want to incorporate this aspect of it as well. Because it allows you the opportunity to frame yourself against your peers within the region as well as nationally, and also on the path that you would want to choose, and that you're actually collecting the data and the evidence to show that indeed you're making the progress as well. It is about this. What that self-study does, what the accreditation does, is to allow you to think about outcomes for your students. It is about helping your institution become much more critical in looking at yourself and the kinds of things that you do as an institution. It is about governance. It is about infrastructure. So, for example, the self-study might report that, for example, your library needs to be fixed, right? If there is not a way to actually determine that, you wouldn't know that you have to go actually fix that library either. And that's what these things allow you to do. So it's about this continuous improvement as well. So our mission, and I'd like for you to dwell on this for just a few seconds. Our mission is to apply evidence-informed and data-informed. So in looking at your strategic plan and all that, it's got to be about measures and metrics and things like that. And I'm not only talking about just, numbers in, numbers out, those kinds of metrics, but also qualitative measures. Are there qualitative measures that you can think of? The growth of the student, the whole student, etc. All those are part of this effort as well. And that it uses those standards and processes to promote continuous improvement that results in student learning and student outcomes and student success. That's the bottom line. And we've changed it completely. Those of you in the good old days, i.e. back in December of 2019, if you went to our website and looked at our mission statement, it would go on for about a whole page. Multiple paragraphs of the mission statement. Who even remembers what the mission of the institution is, of the organization is? This is the mission. It's about the students. Bottom line, your institution, and your president referred to it. So did your board president. That it is about the success of the students that come here. That's primary. It's about changing their human condition is what it's all about. And there's multiple foci within it, depending on the type of institution. We accredit community colleges, we accredit tribal colleges, we accredit four-year colleges and comprehensive universities, Carnegie research institutions like Idaho State University and others as well. And we cannot take the same and apply it in the context of each one of these. Each one has a different context, a different role, a different mission, and things like that. That's why we've got these different foci. But critically important is things about collecting disaggregated data. That is, we want those data that you collect to be disaggregated by gender and ethnicity and race and Pell eligibility and first-generation students, etc. We need those data because we're going to have to try to figure out what's going on in every one of those groups. My favorite all-time statistician's joke is, my head's in the freezer and my feet are in the oven. On average, I'm okay. And when you take averages, average graduation rate, average retention rate, the board here has stated that you need to have a much higher, 80% retention rate or something like that, a much higher graduation rate of, I think, around 60% or so, right? Those are averages. You got to dig a little deeper because you will find that the students that come from poor institutions, from rural communities, from underserved communities, etc., they don't perform as well as the rest of the student body itself. We have to have that disaggregated. And it is really for us, absolutely, positively, is about student success and it's about closing equity gaps. That's what it's all about. And we're going to be looking at those sorts of metrics and measures and things like that as we go forward as well. So what we've created, and we went through this very long process over the last almost 2 years. Several people here in this room were involved in helping us think this through, It was an iterative process, a collaborative process that we went through. And that's what drives the whole thing in terms of these standards and all that in the Department of Education, because that's where the federal money comes from. Oh, by the way, the state is investing that much or more at your institution. When you look at the salaries and things like that of the faculty, you know that institution that I referred to earlier, they're a state institution. Their state taxpayers are paying their salaries. And those faculty are thumbing their noses at requirements that the president says we're going to have about accreditation and assessment and things of that nature as well. So this who gives us the rules of the game, along with potentially the state boards. They have their own rules of the game potentially that will be complementary to this. But we look at us accreditors, we only look at the federal rules because it is about the federal funding that is provided. And then the states will follow suit with what we have done in terms of the federal rules themselves. There's several of these criteria that we need to be looking at. And then we took that and we converted that into these standards. In the good old days, i.e. December of 2019, we had 5 standards with 142 substandards. Today we have 2 standards. And those 2 standards, number 1 is about students, and number 2 is about compliance issues. That's all it is. We've streamlined it, simplified it, we focus completely, singularly on students. Even the compliance issues and all that. In fact, a number of institutions are now under warning with us. In part because they messed up on this. We've been called out. The Northwest Commission has been called out, as have the other accreditors have been called out for not focusing on the students previously. We're the first of the accreditors to focus almost single-mindedly on student and student success, and everything else is in support. Whether it's the libraries or financial systems or audits or whatever else, are all in support of the student success itself. And one other aspect of that student success are issues related to core competencies, learning outcomes, retention, completion, graduation, etc. Now, you offer a number of certificate programs and things like that as well. So it's not just the fact that a student is graduating in quotes with a 4-year degree. It could be that a student's coming in, that their aspirational goal is to get a certificate, or maybe a professional master's or something like that. And so, in how you align yourself with your state board's expectations and all that, it would require some additional conversations then to make sure that there are multiple different components to this. It's not just the graduation, i.e. a student that comes here, for a 4-year degree or whatever, they finish up in X number of years. You typically look at the 6-year degree or 8-year degree or whatever it is, time to completion, is how we look at it. The key aspect of these components right here, this core competencies, particularly in the learning outcomes and all that, is what we want you to do as you're developing your strategic plan and things like that. Think of what it is that at a core, every student in every major, does not matter what major they're in, they're learning some core competencies. This is related to critical thinking and problem solving, issues that Kevin referred to in helping change the human condition. Yes, you're going to be inculcating technical knowledge, no doubt about it. Technical skills. They may be a student in pharmacy, they may be a student in health sciences, they may be a student in liberal arts and sciences, or whatever it is. But they also got to be exposed to and develop these, what we refer to as core competencies. It doesn't mean that you need to have every one of these things. You identify the ones that are most relevant to you, and we'll hold you accountable. Our evaluators are going to come and ask you, maybe you identified the integrative learning, quantitative reasoning, critical thinking, problem solving, and communication skills or something like that as a subset. And we want to be able to have you show us that you're actually tracking that and that you're actually moving the needle. In this new model, by the way, it's not a one and done, you're going to be slammed. It is actually continuous improvement. The idea of continuous improvement is ingrained in this whole process of how we go forward. So 2 standards. Standard 1 is institutional effectiveness. that is about, whoa, sorry, hit the wrong button. It's about students, and the second standard is about all the governance and resources and capacity and things like that. And it's about institutional integrity, financial resources. We're going to be tracking your audit reports, for example, from a financial perspective. Or we're going to be tracking your physical and technology infrastructure. Are you offering the right kind of infrastructure to your students so that it helps them? Everything that you do is supposed to be aligned with outcomes for the student that you've got. And the eligibility requirements. Basically, standards, by the way, are aspirational. I want to get there. And we want you to also set some stretch goals. I know you've been thinking about stretch goals as well. And whereas the eligibility requirements, this is foundational. You either got it or you don't have it. And if you don't have it, you are going to be de-accredited. You lose your accreditation. Okay? And this may be pertaining to any of these various factors that we have here in terms of governance and leadership and student support services and libraries and things of that nature as well. These are foundational. And we have a 7-year cycle, not unlike what we had before. Again, as you're thinking about your strategic thinking and your planning and direction that you want to take and all that, you want to think about how you're going to set into motion this effort that you've got that can track along with our cycle that we've got as well. And the cycle basically is that self-study. We have a team of individuals that comes on board here, does a site visit, and they provide a report to the commissioners, and our commissioners vote. And then after you're voted and you have been, let's say, reaffirmed for your accreditation, then you annually submit a report. These annual reports are going to have some teeth. They're on steroids now, as of now. And our staff, like Selena Grace and Ron Larson and Pam Goad and Max Howell, will work with their institutions. They'll be liaising with their institutions and working very closely to make sure that you're tracking on all of the various metrics and goals you have set in place. And you can track it very easily if you're to make sure that your strategic plan, so the path that you're shooting, also aligns with the path that we're looking for you to be going on. And then after 3 years, so if there are some red flags, you'll be so informed, and you'll be given time to get over that red flag. And if you don't, we'll again ask questions. And if you're not doing too well, then the red flag continues. And when it comes time for your accreditation, you may actually go ahead and lose accreditation at that time. So it's pretty tough. I mean, we put teeth in this effort. It's not, it's an easy, the team is here. We just got to show them a little bit, and it's okay. We're going to be aligned with the things that the Your State Board of Education is also talking about in terms of outcomes that they want to see. They also want to see this movement towards this, continuous improvement. Year 3 or 4, we have a mid-cycle review, and those red flags are particularly going to be looked at, if you've made any progress on it or not. And then in year 6, we will undertake what's referred to as a PERFR, a policies, regulations, and financial review, different from what we've done previously. And here, we'll have a separate team of individuals convened in Redmond, Washington, that's going to take your PERFR report and your annual reports and make sure that all the issues related to governance and financial finances and policies are all appropriate, and that they're resulting in the student outcomes that you have articulated, that you have identified. So that's the cycle that you've got. And in the new model, it's a risk-based model, and it goes along the idea of continuous improvement. That is, you would identify base goals, and then some stretch goals. Okay? We're going to work with you to identify your institutions that you want to be measured against, your regional peers and your national peers. And we're working with the National Student Clearinghouse and other organizations to come up with better data, because we're not doing a really good job of collecting data across America, by the way. And we're working with them And so we're going to be helping you think of who your peers are. You know who your peers are already. But there are some institutions that don't want to game the system in close. And we've got built-in approaches to prevent that gaming from happening as well. And the idea really is, in comparison with your peers, and in comparison with your self-identified goals, how are you doing? You know, from the perspective of continuous process improvement. That's the approach that we want to take. And so the reporting cycle, I've referred to it a little bit already. There's an annual report, and that information is reviewed by our staff, and they'll stay with you. They'll give you feedback on whether you're heading in the right direction or not, on all the different self-identified goals that you've got. You've got goals pertaining to graduation, to completion, to students that are completing certain number of credit hours, certain number of certificate programs, whatever it is you've got that you've identified. Our staff will work with you to make sure that you're actually making progress in it year to year. And if there are red flags, you'll be so alerted, and then we'll want to find out more about why it is. So, for example, you may have an aspirational goal of getting to 80% graduation rate in the next 5 years for your undergraduate students. Okay? That's a pretty big stretch for a lot of institutions. But you're on track to get there in the next few years, and suddenly the budget took a big hit. The economy tanked, and the budget took a big hit, and all these ideas that you had on hiring more faculty and advisors and intrusive advising and yada, 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 all that needs to be, is waylaid. And so we would want to know if there are some mitigating circumstances for why that happened as well. Then we got the mid-cycle report that's focused on standard 1, i.e. about students. And we have a small team of individuals that will come here and look at your review, and they take into account the annual reports as well. And then, year 6, we've got the policies and regulations and financial review, the PERFA review, that's focused on standard 2. And that is an off-site review that's done by experts from around the region that have backgrounds in finances and policies and regulations and CPAs and such. And then the year 7 is the evaluation of institution effectiveness that looks at both standards 1 and 2. And again, that has an on-site peer review team. By the way, because we're splitting up, we're doing annual reports and the mid-cycle review and all that, that's going to be happening. We'll have a smaller team that's going to come here. Our expectation is the net result is we're going to spend less money on accreditation. The net effect is we'll have smaller reports. I saw a report recently that was about 900 pages, and self-study report. And I guarantee you it's not going to be 900 pages, but you're going to be submitting those annual reports as well. So the composite 7-year report is going to be significantly smaller, maybe just 100 or 200 pages, focused on the key issues pertaining to student learning outcomes and the governance issues and things like that as well. And oh, by the way, if you pass the PERFA report, you don't even have to refer to it in your year 7 report, because it's going to be completely streamlined then, in light of the fact that you've already had this external team bless you, saying that you've done a good job in regards to policies and regulations and all that. So there are several student measures that we think we're going to be tracking, and these are all being developed right now. We're going to be offering a whole bunch of training sessions and things like that starting in the first week of March, by the way. And it takes into account various measures focused on student success, including equity gaps. It is disaggregated. We'll have these comparators for you for the regional and national comparator years. And it's focused on continuous improvement. And the idea really is to create this transparent process. That you're transparent in everything that you do, and we're going to be transparent as well. All of these data, by the way, will be posted on your website, as well as our website, because we're going to link to your website, and it's going to be posted there as well. Anybody should be able to look at these data. So what we hope to accomplish is really develop a very close relationship with you as an institution, and that we want to become engaged. Our staff liaison, will meet with your faculty and your staff and your students constantly, and engage with them. And then the idea really is we do not want to create a punitive or a gotcha process. We're going to be so highly knowledgeable about the work that you're doing almost on a daily basis that there should not be any surprises for you or for us. And we are going to be able to help you track and focus on that student achievement part of your outcome that you've got. So the bottom line is, in my mind, a lot of at times, going back to the idea that I suggested previously, that the provost asked somebody to do work with things like that. Faculty are not engaged in it. We want faculty to be engaged in it. And indeed, many institutions have told me, oh man, my accreditation is done in 7 years. I can wait for another 7 years before I go through the process again. No, it's the way we're viewing it, particularly in light of this continuous process improvement, that it's a journey and not a destination. That it's a continuous process. And going back to your strategic thinking and strategic planning process and things like that, you want to view that as a journey. And the destination is constantly going to be changing as we go forward because of the extensive situation that you've got. And that situation is driven by a whole slew of those external pressures and internal pressures that you've got as well. And so what I urge you to do is, as you're embarking on this process, and I tip of my hat to you for thinking along these lines of this changing that human condition, is to align yourself, faculty and staff and students, every one of the approximately, about 13,000 or 14,000 people here that are part of the community. So align yourself with that idea. At the end of the day, it is about changing that human condition. And oh, by the way, I'm going to be on you. Like they say down in Mississippi, like a pig on a dog, And we're going to be on you because we want to make sure that you're aligned 100% with the process of accreditation. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Sonny. Thanks for that information. It's important information for us to have both information about the new economy and what we have to produce by way of our students and information on our accreditation, which when we develop this new strategic plan and the goals we have in there, we will be held accountable by our accreditor for meeting those goals. And so all of that is important to frame our discussion going forward. And so right after our break, the next part of our discussion is going to be a great part. We have a group of industry experts here to talk to us about the market needs and industry needs in reality of what our students are facing now and what they're going to be facing in the future. We have a series of experts, including 2 of our own faculty, the director of the Regional Economic Development Council, the director of the Department of Commerce, and the director of the Idaho STEM Action Center, here to talk to us about what those needs are out there. And that's an important part about framing our discussion going forward. And then we're going to have that hear from the executive director of the State Board of Education about the state board's overall strategic plan for higher education, within which we have to fit our strategic plan. So critical information coming next, but for right now, take about 10 minutes. We're going to get started right at 3 o'clock, so you have 10 minutes to take a break and enjoy your cookie, and then we'll get started.